On Saturday night at 11:44 p.m. GMT, Donald Trump posted an ultimatum in capital letters on Truth Social. Open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours or America obliterates your power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Within hours, Asian markets were in freefall. Circuit breakers triggered in Seoul. Oil spiked. Gulf governments evacuated non-essential diplomatic personnel. Iran responded not with compliance, but with a counter-escalation threat to mine the entire Persian Gulf and destroy energy infrastructure across the region. The International Energy Agency director warned that the global economy faced a major and immediate threat. Military analysts on every continent spent that weekend modeling escalation scenarios. The 48 hours expired on Monday evening, and Trump did not obliterate anything. Instead, he returned to Truth Social in the same capital letters he reserves for things he wants the world to treat as serious, and announced that the United States and Iran had held very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of hostilities. He said strikes on power plants were postponed for 5 days to allow diplomacy to proceed. Iran's state television broadcast that announcement to 87 million people within minutes and placed a graphic on the screen that read, Trump, fearing Iran's response, backed down from his 8-hour ultimatum, not engaged in diplomacy, not achieved progress, backed down out of fear. Iran's semi-official Fars news agency used the same framing. The Mehr news agency echoed it. Iranian officials denied any talks had taken place at all. A senior Iranian foreign ministry official told CBS News that Iran had received points from the United States through intermediaries and that they were being reviewed carefully, not confirming negotiations. Not confirming the premise of Trump's announcement, just received points being reviewed. Two completely irreconcilable versions of the same 8-hour window now exist in the public record. One president declaring very good and productive conversations with major points of agreement. One government stating flatly that no talks occurred and that the man who issued the ultimatum retreated out of fear. What we are going to do in this video is examine exactly what happened between Saturday night and Monday morning with the precision that this moment demands, because this is not simply a diplomatic dispute over who said what. It is a defining test of the one currency that makes international ultimatums function at all, which is credibility and what the last 48 hours have done to it. The timeline is the entire story compressed. On Saturday night, Trump posted the ultimatum. On Sunday, Iran responded not by opening the strait, but by threatening to mine the Persian Gulf, destroy desalination infrastructure serving the Gulf states, and strike energy facilities across the region. The Speaker of the Iranian parliament declared that critical infrastructure, energy, and oil across the region would be irreversibly destroyed and that oil prices would rise for a long time. That word, irreversibly, is doing precise diplomatic work. Iran was not signaling compliance. It was signaling the scale of its counter-move. On Sunday night and into Monday morning, Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey began passing messages between the two governments. A source speaking to Axios confirmed that by Sunday, there was readiness from both sides to begin talking, and that a key driver pushing the American side toward engagement was not strategic momentum or military advantage, it was markets. Asian markets had fallen 6% in Seoul, 3.5% in Tokyo, and 3% in Shanghai. S&P 500 futures were down 1% before Monday's opening bell. That is the honest, analytical account of why the ultimatum was extended. Not a breakthrough in diplomacy, not a shift in Iran's military posture, markets. And the market reaction to Trump's Monday morning Truth Social post confirmed that reading with extraordinary clarity. S&P 500 futures flipped from negative 1% to positive 3% within minutes of the post. Oil fell 6.2%. Dow Jones futures surged toward a 1,000-point gain at open. The market was not reacting to a diplomatic development. It was reacting to a Truth Social post the way it reacts to a central bank intervention. Temporary relief from an unchanged underlying reality. By Monday afternoon, oil had partially recovered its losses because Hormuz remained closed, the war remained active, and no concrete agreement had been confirmed by any independent party. Now, here is where the analysis must be precise, because the factual gap between what Trump announced and what American officials privately confirmed is not the ordinary distance between public optimism and private caution that characterizes all diplomatic communications. It is something more significant. Trump stated the U.S. and Iran had held productive conversations. He said the two sides were aligned on many key issues. He said he was dealing with a man who is the most respected, and that he declined to name him for that person's protection. He said he would be joint controller of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign ministry called the talks claim fabricated. Fars news agency stated no negotiations were underway directly or through intermediaries. American officials speaking privately to the New York Times described the contacts as in a very early stage and not substantive. Very early stage and not substantive are not diplomatic understatements. They are descriptions of a process that had not yet meaningfully begun. Messages passed through 3 intermediary governments on a Sunday, a possible phone call being arranged, a possible meeting being discussed in Islamabad. Trump described that as complete and total resolution conversations with major points of agreement and announced joint control of a waterway that Iranian naval forces have held for 24 days. Ross Harrison, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute and a specialist in Iranian foreign policy, offered an assessment before the deadline expired that proved more accurate by the hour. He said Trump's ultimatum suggested the president was facing limited options to open the strait and that this may be dawning on him. That phrase captures the precise inflection point that Monday morning represented. The moment when the distance between the threat and the military reality of what delivering it would actually require became impossible to ignore. Because executing the stated threat was never a contained operation. Destroying Iranian power plants would have immediately triggered the counter-escalation Iran had publicly committed to. Gulf energy infrastructure attacked, desalination facilities targeted, sea mines deployed across the Persian Gulf. The IEA director had already assessed the situation as worse than the 1,973 and 1,979 oil shocks combined. Executing the strikes against power plants on a conservative modeling would have produced oil at $180 per barrel and global recession within weeks. And after all of that destruction, after the power plants were gone, after Iran executed its counterstrikes, the Strait of Hormuz would still not be open because Iran's capacity to close the strait does not reside in its power plants. It resides in its naval forces, its coastal missile batteries, its mine-laying capability, its fast boat tactics, and its geography. Destroying civilian power infrastructure punishes a population. It does not neutralize a military capability. One analyst told NBC News that military force alone to open the strait probably would not achieve the desired effect unless the United States completely eliminated all capacity for Iranian retaliation, which is not a power plant strike. That is a ground invasion. That is a scenario 74% of Americans oppose. That is a scenario Trump himself has repeatedly ruled out. The ultimatum, when examined against the operational requirements of actually fulfilling it, was a threat whose execution would have produced consequences far more damaging than not executing it. Iran understood that calculation, which is why Iran did not open the strait. And Trump extended the deadline. And Iran broadcast the words "retreated out of fear" to 87 million people. The strategic consequence of this sequence must be stated clearly. Credibility in international relations is the accumulated belief that when a state makes a commitment, it follows through. It is built through consistent behavior over time, and it erodes through precisely the pattern the last 24 days of this conflict have produced. Trump said Iran's military capacity would be functionally degraded within days. 3 weeks later, Iran is still projecting force across 9 countries. He said oil prices would fall like a rock. Oil is at $108. He said the war would be over in 2 to 4 weeks. The Pentagon has since requested an additional $200 billion with no defined timeline. He described the situation as winding down, and 24 hours later posted obliterate the power plants in 48 hours. And then the 48 hours expired without a strike and became a 5-day extension, citing productive conversations that Iran denied occurred. Bloomberg's editorial board assessed the pattern directly, stating that Trump has a decidedly mixed record on carrying through with threats, and that this episode was no different. The New York Times noted that Trump had repeatedly issued optimistic announcements that temporarily eased market pressure only for underlying conditions to reassert themselves. That pattern is now the framework through which every subsequent Trump statement about this conflict will be processed by markets, adversaries, and allies alike. And yet the 5-day extension is not strategically empty, and intellectual honesty requires saying so. 5 days ago, there was no channel between Washington and Tehran. No messages, no intermediaries, no names attached to any potential engagement. Now, Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey are actively carrying communications between the two governments. A name has emerged on the Iranian side in Ghalibaf, the parliament speaker, as a potential interlocutor. A location, Islamabad, is being discussed for a possible in-person meeting. Iran acknowledged receiving points through intermediaries and confirmed they are under review. That is not negotiations. It is not talks in any substantive sense. It is the architecture of a first contact being assembled in real time, and that is a different condition than the one that existed 120 hours ago. The question Friday will answer is whether these 5 days produce something real or whether they produce another extension, another announcement of very good conversations, another temporary oil price relief, and another Iranian state. Television graphic. The IEA director said on Monday that no country will be immune to the effects of this crisis if it continues on its current trajectory. 40 energy facilities across 9 countries have been severely damaged. The strait remains closed. The war remains active. And somewhere in the intermediary channels running through Cairo and Islamabad and Ankara, messages are moving between two governments that have spent 24 days exchanging destruction and are now, possibly for the first time, considering something other than it. Trump said he is dealing with the most respected man and does not want him killed. Iran said Trump retreated out of fear. Both statements were made by governments that need this to end. And in the history of conflicts that have eventually concluded needing something to end has sometimes been enough. Sometimes.